Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of Radiorama, where I show you how to work on, as the name would imply, radios, occasionally televisions, stereos, record players, and stuff like that. And today we have a 1946 Philco Transitone. For those of you who've been watching this station, this is essentially the other version of this model that came with this one collection that was donated that seemed to have pristine bakelite. I'm hoping this is the same thing. There's some notes on it. It says they listened to me. It says not okay. Philco number 7. And we're looking here. The label's in good shape and the bottom bakelite's in good shape. And so I'm going to do what I usually do on these guys, which is use a paste wax, essentially a Carnauba paste wax. In particular, I like to use this stuff, which is Aguirre's traditional cleaner wax, Carnauba. I find that the synthetic stuff doesn't work nearly as well. And in case you're wondering, yes, there are ducks in my yard. They come every year. They come every 2 days for, I don't know, for about a month, until they're done with their whatever they're doing, probably reproducing and having chicks or something like that. But it's nice having them here. And so I'm going to go at it with this Carnauba paste wax, not knowing the actual working condition of the radio, because when I got it, it had a rotten cord, which just because it's a pain in the ass, I just went ahead and chopped off. So I can't really test it, so I'm just going to go out on a limb and assume that I can get it fixed. So I'm committed now. Alright, here we go, day 2, working on the Philco Transitone. And it's actually not a day later. I've been having to admit that I've been working on other projects. Namely this big-ass stereo console on that German set on top of it. That's an episode that'll appear before this one. So you're looking into the future. This is, anyway, this is turning out to be just as good in terms of the bakelite quality as the other Transitone I did recently. Likewise, it also has its perfectly preserved back. It's interesting that both of the cords dry rotted on both those models. But I suspect the chassis is exactly the same as the one I did. It's just a different configuration for the dial. To me, if I was wanting a radio where I could actually read the dial, this is way better than the other hippo-shaped one where the dial was just like kind of behind glass under a screen printing and you could barely see it. I have no idea if this works or not. I assume it's probably got old caps inside that are rotten, so I'm not going to power it up. So I'm going to take the chassis out. We're going to do a looky-loo underneath to see what the story that the guts can tell me. Alright, so here's the back removed, and this is telling me an interesting story. So the other Transitone that I restored also had markings to where the tubes went. So it makes me think maybe these two radios rather, are from the same household, which starts to make more sense, because like clearly it was a household that took really good care of everything. You know, noted as the pristine condition of the surface, and it's really clean. The configuration of the tubes is exactly the same as the other one. So there's more. The tubes are organized in a different way to make room for that huge dial, but other than that, it's identical. It's held in with 3 screws versus the other one that was held in with 1. I hate this antenna system they put in these things. They basically glued an antenna around the interior. So you just got to mark which wire goes where. Usually I paint one of them red with a permanent marker. And then you desolder it, and then we can pull the bolts and pull the chassis. Look underneath. Alright, so I got the chassis out. It's got a tube in here, a brand I've never seen before. It's very fascinating. Guaranteed electron tube. That's literally all it says in there. Doesn't say where it's made or anything. It's first for me. Anyhow, let's flip it over and take a look. And what I can see is that someone has definitely been in here. And they did a very not nice job. We have this gigantic dangling capacitor held in with electrical tape. It probably looks like maybe it has 2 values in it. 50 and 30. I'll have to consult the schematic to make sure that's the right values, like it really matters. Then we've got another one here. It looks like they just spliced it in with more electrical tape. It's kind of a gross job. Other than that, it looks like everything is bone stock. We have that cap right here is fried. Seeing a little dribbly wax is usually not that the end of the deal, but I can tell by looking at the end of this thing. The foil's exposed, so that cap is shorted. It's going across that huge resistor, so that's no good. Where is the 2 chassis cap in this thing? Oh, it's usually this big guy. It's really important to observe which cap in a floating ground radio such as this, where it goes to ground and what value it is. And so this is the wrong value. This is 0.25 microfarads. Why? Because I've worked on enough. So I've memorized what comes in these transitones. That would put quite a bit of current on the metal chassis, and you'd get kind of a big, nasty, uncomfortable zap. So we're going to replace that with a much lower rated microfarad cap, 0.01. And it'll work. It's fine. But it'll lower the amount of current potential that can get to the user if they were to touch the metal chassis, which is not easy on this one because it still has the back, which is good. First things first, we need to replace these 3 electrolytic capacitors. We have, again, 2 here, 1 in there. And I remember every time I do this, I just put 3 47 microfarad caps in there. It's fine. Works just fine. All right, so we have all 3 of the electrolytics replaced, and I daisy chained all of their common negatives together. That goes down there. We have a new cord. I replaced a fried out capacitor, which, by the way, was very fried. The end just came completely off of it. And then we have our safety 2 ground cap, which is the mustard colored guy. That replaced a big whopper that was in there before. So I got it plugged into my isolation transformer. And I've got my antenna hooked up here with some alligator clips. It looks like we've got pilot lamp, which means the filament is lit. Shit. Are you kidding me? That just came loose, so I got to solder that back on there. How annoying. Alright, so I just soldered that little dib-dab of antenna wire back on there, but it seems to be working alright now. Now granted, we got a lot of dust bunnies in the controls.
Now, back to John Ross. After several months. Currently
Pretty sensitive, but I'm not going to run it forever on those old capacitors. This is probably all I'm going to do for this evening. I've actually worked on a few other sets today. So tomorrow we will resume with the recappage job, and who knows? Maybe add an audio input. We'll see. All right, see you tomorrow. The ducks are back. Anyway, last night I decided to clean up the chassis because why not? Spent a little quality time in there and doing some detailing, and also decided to do another polish on the case, so it's really starting to come along. I'm actually finding a difficult time having the desire to want to work on this right now, and the reason is because I got a text message from our members. There's someone giving away an RCA stereophonic console, and he shot me a picture. I was like, oh my god, we got to get it. So luckily 2 of our members went over there and got this. This is just, now I don't care for the electronics in it because I'm not a solid state guy, but this is a solid state machine, and it is loaded up to the gills with speakers. There's 8 speakers inside there. I'm missing the record player, but luckily one of our members who does record players has the right model, and so he's going to restore that, and we'll put that in there. This will be a future episode, but all I can say is I'm really excited. This style is super, super in right now. So, anyway, Back to the Philco chassis. What we need to do is replace the rest of the paper caps that are in here. It looks like we have a total of 5 more, so it's not too bad. And then we're going to clean the volume control and lubricate the tuning mechanism. And then we'll give it another radio test to make sure the radio is still in good working order. Then we will add the audio input feature. Alright, so we've got the rest of the capacitors replaced. Again, there weren't too many in this set. Now I'm going to clean the volume pot. You see how it has this little space where the legs go in, the leads. Well, you want to spray stuff underneath there. Usually douse that and I'll work it in there a whole bunch. That's already moving a lot better. And now what I'm going to do is lubricate some of the tuning components. So we're going to do the shaft that goes through the chassis here. You don't want to get it anywhere near that string because it will slip. But eventually this will work itself in via capillary action. Now it's time to lubricate the other tuning components. We're going to do the bearings on the tuning condenser. Let's get those a little wet. You want to do behind the bearing. And if this has any pulleys, which I don't see any, you want to lubricate them as well, but this is a very simple setup compared to a lot of others. Seems like something is rubbing. That doesn't feel that nice. Maybe it needs more oil. Okay. There we go. Now let's see if we can work that in. Yep. That's all it took, just a little more oil. You'll know, you'll be able to tell, like it'll suddenly just feel a lot smoother. Alright, so now that we have essentially, well, there's one more cap here. I need to replace that. And then I'm going to do a test fire to make sure that radio is still working good. Alright, we're fully recapped here and everything, but before I continue on with the audio input edition, I want to make sure that the safety requirements that we have are met, and that is that the amount of current that can potentially get to the metal chassis is limited. Our max threshold on our multimeter scale set at 2 volts AC is 0.6 of a volt equivalent. And so I've got my box that I can reverse the polarity on, and it's been calibrated for 250 milli VAC. So I know I've already got it in the hot mode, and you can see we're at 0.58. So it's a little hot, but it's not up to our limit, which is admittedly really low, even by today's standards. You should not do this, but like if somehow the worst came down to worst and someone touched this and ground, they might get a little bit of a tingle. It might be uncomfortable, but it's not going to be like full-on god-awful electrocution like you'd have from if it was a true hot chassis where one end was literally the cord. That would be freaking dangerous. So again, word to the wise, if you ever come across a hot chassis set, just be very mindful of it. With the floating hot chassis, you can mitigate that shock potential by, again, installing a safety cap with 0.01 rated microfarad. So now I'm going to do a radio test to make sure that the radio still works, and then we will do the audio input as our last stage for this project. All right, we seem to be working pretty well.
To make sure you get the right amount. A jack that you attach, though, will help track down every
Supreme Court. Look how elected.
Intersection of sports, entertainment, and technology.
Is that it? Seriously, that's it?
What?
Other person. It doesn't make any difference.
So I'm going to peak the IF and RF transformers a little bit.
To restore to you. Undisputed featherweight world Jay McGee. Gender or sexual orientation. 7-minute gap.
Is this epic showdown?
I mean, how cool is it?
All right. It's about as good as AM gets around here. We have so much noise in the air here. Plus, all the crap that's in people's houses. The more wall warts you have, the more transformers you have, the more shitty quality LED lights you have in your house. It all contributes to noise pollution, especially on the AM band. But this is pretty reasonable. Now it's time to add the oh so famous aforementioned audio input feature. And I know that it is a sometimes hot topic amongst the radio collecting community. Do I do it to any of my sets? No, I don't do it. Unless it's something that I actually am going to listen to music on. Such is the case with these guys. For years we would take some of these to various local shows and they'd just sit there. Because people would ask, do they work? It's like, yep. Does it pick up NPR? It's like, nope, it's AM only. And so we had to start adding this feature where people could just, yes, you could still operate the radio if you so chose, but we found that people were pretty ecstatic about being able to, plug in their audio devices and listen to what they wanted to versus being forced to listen to what was on the radio. And let's face it, even here in super liberal California, most of the radio shows on AM are, I don't know, angry talk shows and stuff like that, and it's not fun to listen to unless you're into that sort of thing. So I am going to mount an isolation transformer here. That's the perfect spot for it. Let me get out the components and I'll show you what is involved and we'll be on our merry way. All right, so here's the components that you need. This is the aforementioned isolation transformer. Now, here's the other thing. I buy these by the bulk from China, but you can do the same thing with a wall wart. Like if you crack open a wall wart, there's a little transformer inside of there. And my ratio that I'm using is 120 volts going in through the primary, which is this side, and the other side is 12 volts out for the secondary. And what we're going to do is run the audio signal in reverse. We're going to run the audio signal through the secondary, and then the primary goes to the radio. And how that works, and this is a very easy to demonstrate model. You see your volume pot has 3 legs, and there's a center one and one on each side. We want to utilize the ones that are on the outer edges, so the top and bottom. And there's a negative ground side to the volume pot, and on this case it's very easy. This is going to floating ground, and the other side is the incoming radio signal, which is coming out of this IF transformer. It's the only lead going there. That has to be it. So in addition to adding the audio feature, we want to be able to have the ability to temporarily disable that radio signal. So we'll add a wire here that comes through the back and through the back of the radio, so you can turn that signal on and off. And that way, when you're in audio input mode, you can listen to your music cleanly without having any radio interference. Something I noticed when I was looking at this case is you see this scratched in numbers. People used to do that as a security measure. What they would do is, I'm not sure if it was a service because it's been such a long time. My grandma used to do this, but essentially if someone stole something from you, you could identify it because you'd put a number somewhere either inside or outside of the item. So I get a lot of stuff from this era, and they have like weird little numbers scratched them, and that's what it is. It's a security plan. I guess probably doesn't work very well today. And plus, electronics are so crappy and cheap these days, no one's going to go in your house and risk going to jail for 25 years to steal a shitty 40-inch television set off your wall. All right, so the audio input feature was added. We have our, well, let me explain here. So we've put our right and left channels together through a pair of, I think they're 90 ohm resistors. It doesn't matter. It can be anywhere from 75 to 100 and something ohms. That's going in through the secondary. The primary, we have a 0.05 rated ceramic cap, and that is in series with a resistor that's half the value of the volume pot, about 270K. Then I've snipped this white wire temporarily. That's our radio signal. And what I also did is I tied a knot and I drilled a hole through this and also used a file to make sure the edges were smooth. I put a little bit of glue here to keep it from chafing. This is the cable that goes to the Bluetooth module. So that's a good solid sound. The only thing really left to do now is I'm probably going to put a little glue over the top of these components, because if it ever works itself loose, I don't want it to crash into other electrified circuits here, even though it's unlikely because it's glued on there pretty well. But I'm OCD about that. We'll put it back in the cabinet, reattach the antenna wires, and I need to run a switch wire between those 2 points. I cut it unusually long because I'm not sure how much I need. I try to cut the switch wire as absolutely short as possible when I install it back in the case. All right, it is done, and I gotta say, you know, I've worked on billions of transitones. Again, this is another just about perfect example of one. So I've got my audio running through.
Makes the heart grow fonder, and fonder of you I grow.
And if someone decides, well, I want to listen to the ball game on AM, there's a teeny little micro switch back here. We just flip that, and we get radio.
We're going to talk about the connection between that.
Was able to score from first on Listella's double.
Call 800-479-1790. MyPillow.com.
Anyway, this is a neat little nifty radio. If there's someone that wanted a great example of bakelite, this is it. This is how it came from the factory, real shiny. It's actually surprisingly fragile. So for the finish to have survived in this good a shape, pretty remarkable. Anyhow, thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you saw in this episode, make sure and press that like button. If you have any questions or comments, you can make them down in the comment section below, and I'll try to get to them. I've been pretty busy at work lately, so I'm actually filming a bunch of these in advance, the quiet before the storm, for things get truly busy. And the next episode is going to be that guy, whenever that will be. But anyway, until the next time that an obsolete piece of equipment or radio or anything like that comes across my workbench, I'll see you guys next time. Adios.